"Get out, you're a threat," she screamed at the man trying to stop a thief. But moments later, the truth came crashing down, and the whole store saw who the real criminal was. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jack Thompson leaned against his shopping cart, his weathered hands gripping the metal handle as he navigated the familiar aisles of Morton's grocery. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the neatly arranged shelves. His prosthetic leg made a slight clicking sound against the linoleum floor, a sound he'd grown used to over the years, though he noticed others sometimes stared. He glanced down at the crumpled shopping list in his hand, Emily's neat handwriting reminding him not to forget her favorite cereal. A small smile crossed his face as he thought of his daughter. Even at 12, she was more organized than he'd ever be. Milk, bread, eggs, he muttered to himself, checking items off the list. The store was relatively empty this morning, just how he liked it. Fewer people meant fewer stares, fewer awkward moments when someone noticed his limp. The wheels of his cart squeaked as he turned down the cereal aisle. Jack reached for Emily's preferred brand, his movements deliberate and careful. Years of military training had taught him to always be aware of his surroundings, and that awareness hadn't dulled with time. He could hear the soft music playing through the store's speakers, interrupted occasionally by announcements about special offers. A young mother hustled past with a crying toddler. An elderly man studied nutrition labels with intense concentration, normal, everyday scenes that Jack observed with quiet attention. Moving toward the dairy section, Jack noticed a well-dressed woman, Karen. He'd seen her around town before, standing near the yogurt display. She wore expensive-looking clothes and jewelry that caught the light as she moved. Designer purse hung carelessly from her shopping cart, partially open. Something about the scene made Jack's instincts kick in. Maybe it was the way her attention was completely absorbed in comparing prices, or how her purse seemed to invite trouble. Years of training had taught him to spot potential problems before they developed. That's when he saw him, a teenage boy, trying to look casual as he lingered near Karen's cart. The boy's body language set off immediate alarm bells in Jack's mind. The slight tension in his shoulders, the too careful way he was positioning himself, the quick, darting glances. Jack recognized the signs of someone about to do something they shouldn't. Jack watched as the boy's hand slowly reached toward Karen's purse. Without drawing attention to himself, Jack began pushing his cart forward, his movements measured and purposeful. He'd learned in the military that sometimes the best way to prevent a situation was simply to be present. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jack positioned himself between the boy and Karen. He didn't make eye contact with the would-be thief, didn't say a word. He simply stood there, arranging items in his cart, creating a barrier with his presence alone. The boy's hand withdrew. Jack could feel the teenager's eyes on him, could sense the moment when the young man realized he'd been spotted. From the corner of his eye, Jack saw the boy's shoulders slump slightly before he turned and walked away, trying to maintain an air of casualness. Jack allowed himself a small breath of relief. No confrontation necessary, no scene, just a quiet intervention that had prevented a theft. He was about to move on when Karen turned around, her expensive perfume wafting through the air as she noticed his proximity. Her eyes widened, taking in his appearance, the worn hoodie, the old jeans, the slight unevenness in his stance from his prosthetic leg. Her perfectly manicured hands tightened on her purse as she pulled it closer to her chest. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. "What do you think you're doing?" Jack opened his mouth to explain, but Karen cut him off with a raised hand. Her face had transformed from surprise to anger, her cheeks flushing red as she took a step back. "I saw you hovering around my purse," she said, her voice rising. "Were you trying to steal from me?" Jack felt his chest tighten. He'd faced enemy fire without flinching, but this kind of confrontation, these accusations, made his throat close up. "Ma'am, I was actually trying to—" "Don't ma'am me," Karen interrupted, her voice getting louder. Other shoppers were starting to look their way. "I know what I saw. You were much too close to my cart, and I want to know why." Jack could feel the stares of other customers now, their eyes boring into him. His prosthetic leg suddenly felt heavier, more noticeable. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, more harsh. The quiet morning he'd hoped for was rapidly dissolving into exactly the kind of situation he tried to avoid. There was a boy, he started to explain, keeping his voice low and steady. He was trying to. A likely story, Karen scoffed, cutting him off again. She turned toward the front of the store. Manager! Manager! I need assistance immediately. Jack stood there, rooted to the spot, as Karen's voice echoed through the store. The whispers of other shoppers grew louder, and he could hear the quick footsteps of someone, presumably the manager, heading their way. He thought of Emily, of how she would feel when she heard about this. His daughter had enough to deal with at school without adding this kind of drama to her life. But he also knew he couldn't just walk away. That would only make him look guilty. So he stayed, his hands loosely gripping his shopping cart, his back straight despite the growing discomfort of the situation. He'd faced worse, he reminded himself. He could handle this with dignity, even if. Karen couldn't see past her own prejudices to understand what had really happened. The clicking of his prosthetic leg seemed louder now as he shifted his weight, waiting for the manager to arrive. The dairy section's cooling units hummed in the background, a steady drone that matched the pounding of his heart. He watched as Karen's accusations drew more attention, her voice carrying through the once quiet store, transforming his simple shopping trip into something else entirely. Through the growing crowd, Jack caught sight of the teenage boy slipping out the store's front entrance, and he felt a mix of frustration and resignation. He'd prevented a theft, but at what cost to himself? The irony wasn't lost on him. No good deed goes unpunished, as the saying went. I want this man removed immediately. Karen's voice rose above the quiet murmur of shopping carts. Her finger jabbed toward Jack, designer bracelets jingling with each accusatory gesture. Jack felt curious stares from other shoppers. His throat tightened. Ma'am, if you just listen. I don't need to listen to anything. Karen cut him off, voice dripping disdain. She clutched her purse tighter. I saw you lurking near my cart. You were trying to steal from me. A crowd gathered, abandoning their carts. Jack heard whispers, saw judging looks. Some pulled out phones. This would spread through their small town quickly. There was a boy, Jack said firmly, keeping his voice steady despite the humiliation. He was attempting to, Oh, now there's a mysterious boy? Karen laughed mockingly. How convenient. Where is he then? She turned to the crowd. Did anyone see this supposed boy? Onlookers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Jack's prosthetic leg felt heavier, phantom pain intensifying under stress. He'd faced combat with less anxiety than this public confrontation. Manager, Karen called out. I demand something be done about this person. The way she said person made Jack's jaw clench. He'd heard that tone before, the same one people used when they saw his prosthetic, as if his disability made him less human. I've been shopping here for years. She continued louder. I'm a valued customer, and I will not be harassed. The store manager appeared, Tom, a middle-aged man Jack recognized. Tom's face was flushed, his name tag askew. What's the problem here? Tom asked, looking between them uncomfortably. Before Jack could speak, Karen launched into her version. This man was hovering around my cart, clearly trying to steal from my purse. When I caught him, he made up some ridiculous story. I want him removed immediately. Tom turned to Jack, recognition flickering. Jack had shopped here for years, always quiet and polite, but Tom's gaze shifted away. Mr. Thompson, Tom began hesitantly. Perhaps it would be best if I was trying to help, Jack interrupted, military training evident in his posture despite the shame. There was a teenage boy attempting to steal from her purse. I positioned myself to prevent the theft. Karen scoffed. A likely story. Tom, you're not going to believe this vagrant over me, are you? I spend thousands here monthly. Jack watched Tom's face fall, caught between right and wrong. The manager fidgeted with his vest, discomfort obvious. Listen, Tom said quietly, still not meeting Jack's eyes. Maybe you should finish shopping another time, Mr. Thompson, to avoid further misunderstandings. The words hit like physical blows. He'd served his country, lost his leg in combat, raised his daughter alone, and now was being treated like a criminal. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the whispers too loud. You know me. Tom shifted uncomfortably, glancing at triumphant Karen. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. It's temporary, until things calm down. Karen's smug expression made Jack's stomach turn. She adjusted her handbag, satisfied smile playing at her lips. Well, I'm glad someone's taking action. I'll tell everyone how well you handled this, Tom. The crowd had grown larger, phones recording. Jack felt judgment in their stares, quick looks at his prosthetic, how they edged away as if he were dangerous. I understand, Jack said finally, voice tight with controlled emotion. He'd learned in the military that sometimes retreat was better. I'll leave my cart here, Tom. As he turned to leave, prosthetic clicking against linoleum, he heard Karen behind him. And don't think about coming back. I'll be informing the police. Jack kept walking, back straight, face composed, though whispers and stares followed him out. He'd survived war, loss, and countless hardships, but this humiliation cut deeper than physical pain. The automatic doors opened to morning sun. He could already hear Emily's questions, see concern in her eyes when she learned what happened. How could he explain that sometimes doing right wasn't enough? That people saw what they wanted, regardless of truth? Each step toward his truck felt like defeat, his prosthetic marking time with retreat. Behind him, doors slid open as curious shoppers watched him leave, whispers carrying on morning air. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Jack and Emily sat in uncomfortable silence. Emily pushed her cornflakes around while Jack watched with concern. You need to eat something, sweetheart, Jack said softly. Emily dropped her spoon. How can I eat when everyone's talking about us? Madison and her friends stopped whispering when I walked into the cafeteria. They were talking about you, Dad. Jack's heart ached. People talk, Em. They'll find something else soon enough. But it's not fair. That woman was wrong about you. Why didn't you make her listen? Jack covered Emily's hand with his weathered one. Sometimes people see what they want to see, honey. Like Mrs. Peterson yesterday. She used to say hi, but now she just turned away. Jack felt familiar tightness in his chest. He'd noticed the changes, conversations dying when he entered rooms, reminding him of returning from service when people didn't know how to act around a veteran with a prosthetic leg. What matters is we know the truth, Jack said. We can't control what others think, but we can control how we handle it. Emily stabbed her cereal. Tommy's mom said sometimes veterans come back different, that they're not right in the head. The words hit like a physical blow. Your old man's head is fine, Jack forced a smile. Remember what we always say? Actions speak louder than words, Emily recited. That's right. We'll keep being good neighbors, helping where we can. The truth comes out eventually. After breakfast, Jack drove Emily to school, noticing how she slumped as they approached. Head high, sweetheart. You've done nothing wrong. At the Daily Grind, his usual coffee shop, the cheerful greetings were replaced by furtive glances. Sarah, the barista who normally had his order ready, kept her eyes down. The usual Sarah. Black coffee, 2 sugars. While waiting, Jack noticed whispered conversations. Women at a corner table stole glances his way. I heard he was acting erratic, one whispered. You know how some of them are after coming back. Jack's jaw tightened. His neighbor, Mr. Wilson, entered, looking straight through him like he was invisible. The isolation felt suffocating. Jack paid and left, deciding to skip other errands. As he drove home, he thought about combat. You always knew your enemies. Here, the weapons weren't bullets, but whispers, not explosions, but cold shoulders. He'd have to lay low for Emily's sake, maybe shop in the next town. The weight of social isolation pressed down, heavier than any military rucksack. But he'd survived worse, losing his leg, his wife, rebuilding as a single father. He could survive this too. Jack knelt on the living room floor, his prosthetic leg stretched out to one side as he tightened the last screw on the wobbly coffee table. The familiar motions of home repair brought him comfort. At least here, in his own space, he could fix what was broken. The afternoon sun cast warm patches across the worn carpet, and the house was peaceful until the front door burst open. Emily rushed in, her backpack sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. Her face was flushed, and her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. "Dad, you need to see this." Jack set down his screwdriver and pulled himself up, using the coffee table for support. The concern in Emily's voice made his stomach tighten. "What's wrong?" Emily thrust the phone toward him, her eyes wide with distress. "It's that woman from the store, Karen. She posted this online an hour ago." Jack took the phone, adjusting his reading glasses. The screen showed a long social media post, complete with angry emojis. As he read, his jaw clenched. "Shopping turned frightening today," he read silently. A threatening man, tall, unkempt, wearing a suspicious hoodie, invaded my personal space and tried to steal my purse. When I confronted him, he became aggressive. These incidents are becoming more common in our peaceful community. We need to stay vigilant and protect ourselves from such dangerous individuals, the post went on, describing how Karen had been terrorized and how the store management had to intervene. Each word felt like a physical blow. She'd even included a blurry photo someone had taken of him leaving the store, his prosthetic leg visible. "She's lying!" Emily's voice cracked. "How can she say those things about you? Everyone at school is sharing it." Bella's mom already commented, saying she won't shop at that store anymore unless they improve security. Jack handed the phone back to Emily, his movements careful and measured. Inside, his heart was pounding, but he fought to keep his expression neutral. "It's okay, Emily. People will forget about it soon enough." "But it's not okay." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You were trying to help her. You're a hero, not some criminal." Jack stepped forward and pulled his daughter into a hug, feeling her shoulders shake. "I'm no hero, sweetheart. I'm just your old dad who happens to notice things sometimes. That's all." The phone in Emily's hand buzzed again, and she pulled away to look at it. Her face fell further. There are more comments now. People are sharing it everywhere. Jack moved to the kitchen, needing something to do with his hands. He filled the kettle and set it on the stove. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked, trying to change the subject. Emily slumped at the kitchen table, still scrolling through her phone. "Dad, we have to do something. We have to tell people what really happened." Before Jack could respond, his own phone rang. The caller ID showed Mike Davidson, his old friend from the police force who'd retired last year. Jack answered, stepping into the hallway. "Jack." Mike's voice was grave. "I'm guessing you've seen Karen Hayes' post?" "Yeah, Emily just showed me. It's making rounds in all the community groups. I've got Helen from the Neighborhood Watch calling me about it, and the Parents Association is in an uproar." Mike sighed heavily. "Look, I know you, Jack. I know what really happened. But this woman's got influence in town, and people are listening to her version." Jack leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling every year of his age. "What am I supposed to do, Mike? Write my own post? Get into an online argument? I don't know, buddy. But this isn't going away on its own." Karen Hayes is connected. Her husband's on the town council. She runs half the charitable committees in town. People trust her word. Jack glanced back into the kitchen where Emily sat, her shoulders hunched, still staring at her phone. The kettle began to whistle, but he couldn't bring himself to move. "Thanks for the heads up, Mike," he said quietly. "Take care of yourself, Jack, and that girl of yours. Call if you need anything." The line went dead, and Jack stood there for a long moment, the whistling kettle piercing through his thoughts. He'd faced combat, lost his leg, lost his wife, but somehow, this felt different. This wasn't a physical enemy he could fight, or a problem he could solve with determination and grit. He returned to the kitchen and turned off the stove. Emily looked up at him, her young face pinched with worry. "That was Uncle Mike, wasn't it? What did he say?" Jack managed a small smile, though it felt forced. "Nothing important. How about that hot chocolate?" But as he went through the motions of making their drinks, Jack felt the weight of what was happening settle over him like a heavy blanket. Karen's words were out there now, spreading through the community like poison. His reputation, something he'd built carefully over years of quiet living and helping where he could, was being dismantled by someone who'd spent less than 5 minutes with him. He set a steaming mug in front of Emily, noting how she'd finally put her phone face down on the table. The afternoon sun had shifted, leaving the kitchen in shadows, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that darker days were ahead. But he'd be damned if he'd let Emily see how much this was affecting him. He'd learned in the military that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was just keep moving forward, one step at a time. "Did you have any homework today?" he asked, sitting down across from her. Emily shook her head, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Of course we are. We're Thompsons. We stick together, remember?" But even as he said the words, Jack could feel the walls closing in. The town that had been their home for so long suddenly felt hostile, and he knew this was just the beginning. Karen's post would continue to spread, and with it, the sideways glances, the whispers, and the judgment would only grow. He'd survived worse, but watching his daughter suffer through this was a different kind of pain entirely. Emily walked through the crowded hallway of Mason Middle School, her shoulders hunched and her gaze fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. The familiar buzz of student chatter filled the air, but today it felt different, more threatening. As she approached her locker, she caught fragments of whispered conversations that made her chest tighten. "Did you hear about her dad?" A girl's voice carried from nearby. "My mom says he tried to steal some lady's purse at the grocery store." "No way," another voice responded. "Isn't he, like, a veteran or something?" Emily's hands shook as she worked her locker combination. The metal dials slipped through her fingers twice before she managed to get it right. Her textbooks felt heavier than usual as she pulled them out, the weight of them matching the heaviness in her heart. More whispers floated around her. "I heard he's really scary looking. My mom saw Karen's post online. Can you believe someone would do that?" The hallway seemed to close in around her. Emily clutched her books to her chest like a shield, willing herself to become invisible. These were the same kids she'd sat with at lunch just last week, the same ones who'd invited her to birthday parties and study groups. Now they looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if her father's supposed crime had somehow tainted her too. During lunch period, Emily didn't head to her usual table. Instead, she found an empty corner of the library, hiding behind a shelf of encyclopedias that nobody ever used anymore. She pulled out her sandwich, but couldn't bring herself to eat it. Her stomach was too knotted with anxiety. Sarah, her best friend since 4th grade, appeared around the corner. "Emily, why are you eating in here?" Emily shrugged, picking at the crust of her sandwich. "Just felt like being alone." "Is this about what everyone's saying?" Sarah shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable. "My mom said." "I don't care what your mom said," Emily snapped, immediately regretting her harsh tone. "I'm sorry. My dad didn't do anything wrong. He was trying to help." Sarah stood there awkwardly for a moment before backing away. "Okay, well, I'll see you in math class, maybe?" Emily nodded, but they both knew she wouldn't be sitting in her usual seat next to Sarah. The rest of the day passed in a blur of avoided gazes and whispered comments. In math class, Emily chose a desk in the back corner, away from everyone else. During group work, nobody asked her to join them. By the time the final bell rang, Emily felt completely drained. The walk home seemed longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of the day's emotions. When she finally reached their modest 2-story house, she found her dad in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Jack looked up from the cutting board where he was chopping vegetables, his face brightening at the sight of her. "Hey, kiddo, how was school?" Emily dropped her backpack by the door and slumped into a kitchen chair. The familiar smell of her dad's cooking, tonight it was his signature stir-fry, would normally be comforting. But today even that couldn't lift her spirits. "It was awful," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Everyone's talking about what happened. They're saying such terrible things about you, Dad." Jack set down his knife and moved to sit across from her, his prosthetic leg making a soft sound against the linoleum floor. His weathered face showed concern, but also a deep understanding. "Want to tell me about it?" The dam broke. Emily's words tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by sniffles. "Nobody will sit with me anymore. Sarah barely talks to me now. I heard kids saying you're dangerous, that you're a thief. But you're not. You're the best dad ever, and they don't even know you." Jack reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused. The same hand that had bandaged her scraped knees and wiped away countless tears. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, Em. None of this is fair to you. I just want things to go back to normal," Emily whispered, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "Can't you do something? Talk to Karen, maybe?" Jack sighed, running his other hand through his graying hair. "I wish it were that simple, sweetheart, but I promise you, I'll figure something out. We'll make this right." Emily could see the struggle in her father's eyes, the same determined look he got when facing any challenge, mixed with uncertainty about how to protect his daughter from this particular kind of pain. The next day, instead of letting Emily isolate herself at home, Jack suggested they visit Henderson Park. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass as they walked along the winding path. The park was relatively empty, just a few dog walkers in the distance and some kids on the playground. They found a quiet bench overlooking the duck pond. Emily remembered feeding the ducks here when she was younger, standing on her tiptoes to reach over the railing while her dad held onto the back of her jacket to make sure she didn't fall in. "Remember when you used to call that one duck with the funny waddle Sir Quacks a lot?" Jack asked, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Emily couldn't help but laugh. "Dad, I was like 7, and it was a perfectly good name for a duck," Jack insisted, nudging her shoulder gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks glide across the water. The tension Emily had been carrying all day began to ease slightly. Here, with just her dad and the ducks, the whispers and stares from school seemed far away. "We're going to be okay. You know that, right?" Jack said softly, his voice steady and sure despite everything they were facing. "We've gotten through tough times before." Emily leaned her head against her father's shoulder, feeling the familiar strength there. "I know, Dad. We've got each other." The sun continued its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The water reflected the colors, making the pond look like it was filled with liquid gold. In that moment, Emily felt the special bond she shared with her father, a connection that no amount of gossip or cruel words could break. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The grocery store's red brick facade loomed before him, once routine, now a monument to his humiliation. He watched customers entering and exiting, living normal lives that seemed increasingly out of reach. "Maybe it would be better," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Fresh start somewhere nobody knows me." His phone buzzed. The store manager's number appeared. "Hello? Mr. Thompson?" The manager's voice carried forced professionalism. "We've received complaints about your presence. I'm afraid we have to ask you not to return. Customer safety." As if he, who'd spent 20 years protecting others, was somehow a threat. "You know I didn't do anything wrong. My hands are tied. I'm sorry." Jack ended the call. The unfairness pressed down on him. He'd faced combat, lost his leg serving his country, endured surgeries and rehabilitation. He'd learned to walk again, to be a single father, to rebuild his life. Now, because of one woman's false accusations, it was crumbling. When he pulled into his driveway, Emily sat on the porch with homework. She looked up, reading his mood. "What's wrong?" Inside, they settled at the kitchen table. "I've been thinking we should move somewhere else. Start fresh." Emily's eyes widened. "Leave? This is our home." "The store banned me. People won't forget. So we run away? You taught me to stand up for what's right." Her words struck home. Despite everything, determination blazed in her eyes. Sometimes when people make up their minds, but they're wrong. If we leave, they'll never know the truth. Life isn't always fair, Em. That doesn't mean we give up. Emily took his hand. "Remember when I wanted to quit physical therapy? You said giving up only hurts ourselves." Jack squeezed gently. remembering her frustration with her broken arm. I have friends here, school. You have your veterans group. Jack looked around their kitchen growth marks on the doorframe, family photos, details that made this home. You really want to stay and fight? Emily nodded firmly. We're Thompsons. We don't run from bullies. Despite everything, Jack felt pride surge. His 12-year-old daughter showed more courage than he had. Okay, we'll try once more. But if things get worse, we'll face it together, like always. They sat in comfortable silence. Jack knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, but looking at Emily's determined face, he felt something he hadn't in days: hope. Emily sat at her usual lunch table in the school cafeteria, picking at her sandwich without much enthusiasm. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at the grocery store, and the whispers about her dad still hadn't died down. The table felt emptier these days. Some of her friends had started sitting elsewhere. She pulled out her math homework, trying to focus on something other than the constant ache in her chest. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chatter, but one conversation from the table behind her caught her attention. "Did you hear about Karen Hayes?" a girl whispered loudly. "My mom says the police found her purse." Emily's hand froze mid-equation. She kept her head down, but strained to hear more. "Yeah, my dad told me about it," another voice chimed in. "They caught these kids who'd been stealing from people at stores all over town. Apparently, they were targeting rich people, especially at that grocery store." Emily's heart began to race. She gripped her pencil tighter, afraid to move and miss any details. "I heard they found like 10 stolen wallets when they caught them," the first girl continued. "My mom says Karen was lucky someone scared that guy away that day at the store." Emily's chest tightened. They were talking about her dad, but they didn't even know it. She wanted to turn around and tell them everything, but she forced herself to stay still and listen. "The weird thing is," the second girl lowered her voice even more, "my brother works at the movie theater, and he says one of the kids confessed that some man almost caught him that day." Said the guy positioned himself just right to block him from getting to Karen's purse. Emily's sandwich lay forgotten as she absorbed every word. Her dad had been telling the truth all along, not that she'd ever doubted him. But now there was proof. "They're saying it was this whole gang of teenagers," the first girl added. "They've been doing this for months. Can you believe it?" Emily couldn't sit still any longer. She shoved her homework into her backpack, her hands trembling with excitement. This was it. This was what they needed to clear her dad's name. She glanced at the clock on the cafeteria wall. Still 2 hours until school ended, but she could hardly focus on anything else. During her last class, Emily's leg bounced impatiently under her desk. Her teacher's voice faded into background noise as she planned what she'd tell her dad. The minute the final bell rang, she bolted from her seat. Emily ran the entire 6 blocks home, her backpack thumping against her spine with each step. All she could think about was getting home to her dad. She burst through the front door, out of breath and flushed. "Dad!" she called out, dropping her backpack by the door. "Dad! Where are you?" Jack emerged from the kitchen, a dish towel in his hands. "Emily? What's wrong?" His face creased with concern at her urgent tone. "Nothing's wrong," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "Everything's right! Dad, I heard something at school today about Karen's purse." Jack's expression shifted from worry to curiosity. He pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, gesturing for Emily to do the same. "Take a breath first, kiddo. Then tell me what you heard." Emily dropped into the chair across from him, her words tumbling out in excitement. "The police found Karen's purse. They caught the kids who tried to steal it. It was this whole group of teenagers who'd been stealing from people all over town." Jack's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent, letting Emily continue. "One of the kids admitted that someone stopped him that day, someone who blocked him from getting to Karen's purse." Emily reached across the table and grabbed her father's hand. "That was you, Dad. You were right all along, and now everyone will know it." Jack sat back in his chair, processing the information. His weathered face softened, and Emily could see the relief washing over him. "Are you sure about this, Emily? About what you heard?" "Yes." Emily nodded vigorously. Sarah Miller's mom works at the police station. That's how everyone knows. And Tommy's brother, who works at the movie theater, heard one of the kids confess everything. Jack ran a hand over his face, and Emily noticed his shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. He said finally, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That certainly changes things. We have to tell everyone, Emily insisted. We have to make Karen take back what she said about you. Jack reached over and squeezed her hand. Hold on there, sweetheart. Let's think this through carefully. We need to handle this the right way. Emily slumped back in her chair, but she knew her dad was right. After a moment, she asked, "What are we going to do?" "First," Jack said, standing up and walking to the counter, "we're going to have dinner. Then we'll sit down and figure out our next steps together." He pulled out a pot and filled it with water. "How does spaghetti sound?" Emily smiled, watching her dad move around the kitchen with a lightness she hadn't seen in weeks. The truth was finally out there, and soon everyone would know what she'd known all along. Her dad was a hero, not a thief. As Jack prepared dinner, Emily sat at the kitchen table, doing her homework but occasionally glancing up to see her father deep in thought. She could tell he was already forming a plan, and for the first time in weeks, hope filled their little house again. Jack's old truck rumbled into the grocery store parking lot early Tuesday morning. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the nearly empty lot. Emily sat beside him, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. She'd insisted on coming with him before school, saying she needed to be there when he talked to the manager. "You sure about this, kiddo?" Jack asked, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. Emily nodded firmly. "Someone needs to tell the truth, Dad." Jack's prosthetic leg caught slightly as he stepped down from the truck, but he barely noticed any more. Years of practice had made the movement almost natural. Emily hurried around to his side, her face set with determination that reminded him so much of her mother. The automatic doors slid open with a gentle whoosh. The store was quiet at this hour, with just a few early morning shoppers pushing their carts down the aisles. A young employee stocking shelves glanced their way nervously, probably remembering the scene from a few weeks ago. Jack walked purposefully toward the manager's office at the back of the store, Emily matching his stride. His heart pounded, but he kept his expression neutral. The manager's door was open, and through it they could see him sorting through paperwork at his desk. Jack knocked on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" The manager's head snapped up, his eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I thought I was clear about—" "Please," Emily interrupted, stepping forward. "We have something important to tell you." The manager's expression softened at Emily's earnest tone. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Come in, but make it quick. The morning rush will start soon." Jack settled into one of the chairs, while Emily perched on the edge of the other. The office was small, cramped with filing cabinets and a desk that had seen better days. A nameplate read, "Robert Miller." "Mr. Miller," Jack began, his voice steady. "I know you banned me from the store based on Karen Hayes' complaints, but there's something you need to know." The manager shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Thompson, I understand you're upset, but the boy who tried to steal Karen's purse was caught," Emily blurted out. "He was part of a gang that's been targeting shoppers. Dad was trying to stop him that day, but Karen wouldn't listen." Miller's eyebrows rose. "What? How do you know this?" "I heard it at school," Emily continued. "The police caught them, and they returned Karen's purse. She knows the truth now, but she hasn't said anything to clear Dad's name." Jack watched the manager's face carefully. The man looked troubled, his fingers drumming nervously on his desk. "Is this true?" he asked Jack. "Every word," Jack replied. "I saw that kid trying to grab her wallet. All I did was try to protect her, but she jumped to conclusions because—" He gestured to his prosthetic leg, leaving the rest unsaid. Miller removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I should have handled this differently from the start. I knew something wasn't right about her story, but she's been a regular customer for years, and her husband sits on the town council. So that makes it okay to judge someone without hearing their side?" Emily's voice quivered with emotion. My dad served this country. He helps people all the time, but one person says something bad about him, and everyone believes it. The manager had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. I apologize, Mr. Thompson. I should have investigated more thoroughly. Jack leaned forward in his chair. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because this needs to be made right. My daughter shouldn't have to deal with whispers and stares at school because of false accusations. Miller nodded slowly. I'll speak with Mrs. Hayes. Now that I know about the attempted theft and the arrests, she'll have to acknowledge what really happened. And the ban? Jack asked quietly. Lifted, effective immediately. Miller stood up and extended his hand. I'm truly sorry, Mr. Thompson. Jack stood and shook the offered hand, but his expression remained guarded. Thank you. But actions speak louder than words, Mr. Miller. I hope you'll follow through. Emily gathered her backpack, looking slightly more hopeful than when they'd arrived. As they turned to leave, Miller called after them. Mr. Thompson? For what it's worth, I always appreciated how you'd help the elderly customers with their groceries. We've missed that around here. Jack nodded but didn't respond. He and Emily walked out of the office and through the store, which was starting to fill with more shoppers. A few people stared, but Jack kept his head high. Back in the truck, Emily turned to her father. Do you think he'll really talk to Karen? Jack started the engine, the familiar rumble somehow comforting. We'll see, sweetie. At least now, someone else knows the truth. But it's not enough, is it? Emily asked softly. Jack looked at his daughter, seeing the worry in her eyes. Sometimes doing the right thing takes time. We've done what we can for now. They pulled out of the parking lot as the morning sun finally cleared the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Jack knew the manager's promises might not amount to much, but at least they'd taken a step toward clearing his name. Still, as he drove Emily to school, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Emily stood at Morton's grocery entrance, heart pounding. Through the glass, she spotted Karen's blonde hair near produce. Taking a breath, she smoothed her uniform and walked inside. The store smelled of fresh bread and cleaning supplies. Early shoppers gave her curious looks. They knew Jack Thompson's daughter shouldn't be here alone. Karen examined organic apples, designer purse clutched closer since the incident. Mrs. Hayes. Emily's voice stayed steady. Karen turned, confusion then recognition crossing her face. You're Jack Thompson's daughter.
Emily, I need to talk about what happened with my dad.
Karen's expression hardened.
That's inappropriate.
Where's your father? Did he send? No, he doesn't know I'm here. But you need to hear something. Shoppers slowed, pretending to examine displays while listening. Karen glanced around uncomfortably. The police returned your purse, Emily continued, voice strengthening. They caught the teenage boy who tried stealing it. He's part of a gang targeting local stores. Karen's eyebrows drew together. I don't see what. My dad saw that boy and moved closer to protect you, not hurt you. He's a veteran. He notices things others don't. Color rose in Karen's cheeks. She avoided Emily's gaze. That's quite a story. It's truth. You accused him without understanding, posted about him online, made everyone think he's dangerous, but he was helping you. Karen's composure cracked. I need to finish shopping. The police have proof, the boy confessed. Karen's lips pressed thin. Shame flashed across her face before hardening again. If that's true, perhaps there was a misunderstanding, Karen said stiffly. But his behavior was inappropriate. He should have contacted security. Tears pricked Emily's eyes. There wasn't time. He helps people, that's all he does. You hurt him. You hurt our family. Silence fell heavy. Shoppers stopped pretending not to listen. Karen fidgeted with her purse strap. I need to go. She walked quickly toward checkout, abandoning her cart. Emily watched, heart racing with pride and anxiety. She'd done it, told the truth. The walk home felt long. She found Jack at the kitchen table, looking worried. Where were you? You'll be late for school. Emily dropped her backpack. I talked to Mrs. Hayes. Jack's face paled. You what? I told her the truth about the boy and how you were helping. Jack sank back, running a hand over his face.
Oh, Emily, I had to, Dad. It wasn't fair.
Jack stayed quiet, then pulled her into a hug.
You're braver than me, kiddo.
But you shouldn't have had to. Someone had to tell her. Jack pulled back, hands on her shoulders. You stood up for what you believed. That's never wrong. What did she say? Emily shrugged. She made excuses, then left. I don't know if she'll do anything. Jack nodded slowly. We'll wait and see. But I'm proud of you. He glanced at the clock. Come on, I'll drive you to school. The doorbell rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Jack Thompson looked up from his newspaper, exchanging a puzzled glance with Emily, who was working on her homework at the kitchen table. They weren't expecting visitors. Through the window, Jack caught sight of a familiar figure standing on his front porch. Karen Hayes shifted from foot to foot, clutching her designer purse like a shield. Her usually perfect posture seemed slightly wilted. Dad? Emily's voice carried a note of concern. Jack stood up slowly, his prosthetic leg clicking against the hardwood floor. It's okay, sweetie. I'll handle this. When he opened the door, Karen's carefully maintained composure cracked just a little. She looked smaller somehow, standing on his porch in her expensive clothes, her eyes darting everywhere but his face. Mr. Thompson, she began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I need to speak with you. Jack studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. Mrs. Hayes. Karen entered his modest home, her high heels clicking against the floor. Her gaze swept over the living room, the worn but clean furniture, the family photos on the walls, Emily's art projects proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Emily watched from the kitchen doorway, her math homework forgotten. Jack gestured toward the couch, and Karen perched on the edge, like she was afraid to get too comfortable. I received a call from the police department, Karen said, her fingers still wrapped tightly around her purse. They caught the boy who tried to steal from me that day. Jack sat in his armchair, keeping his expression neutral. I heard. He confessed to being part of a group targeting shoppers at Morton's. Karen's words came out in short bursts, like she was forcing them past her pride. He said you stopped him that day. That you noticed what he was doing and blocked his escape route. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the living room. Jack could hear the tick of the old wall clock, counting the seconds of this unexpected confession. That's right, he said simply. Karen's perfectly manicured fingers twisted in her lap. I was wrong about you, Mr. Thompson. I jumped to conclusions based on... She paused, still unable to fully acknowledge her prejudices. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made. Emily stepped further into the room, her presence seeming to make Karen even more uncomfortable. The woman glanced at the young girl, then quickly looked away. The thing is, Karen continued, I've always prided myself on being a good judge of character. I serve on multiple community boards. I organize charity events. I thought I knew better. Jack leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Hayes, being wrong doesn't make you a bad person. How we handle being wrong, that's what matters. Karen's shoulders stiffened. Yes, well, I wanted you to know that I've asked the store manager to lift the ban, and I've removed my post from the community forum. It wasn't quite an apology, but Jack could see how much even this admission cost her. Pride was a heavy burden to put down, even piece by piece. I appreciate you coming here, Jack said quietly. It couldn't have been easy. Karen stood up abruptly, smoothing her skirt. Yes, well, I should go. I have a committee meeting this afternoon. As Jack walked her to the door, Emily spoke up. Mrs. Hayes? Karen turned, finally meeting the girl's eyes. Thank you for telling the truth, Emily said, her voice clear and strong, even if it was hard. Something flickered across Karen's face, respect, perhaps, or shame. She nodded once, then hurried out the door to her waiting luxury SUV. Jack and Emily watched from the window as Karen drove away. The late afternoon sun caught the chrome of her car, sending brief flashes of light across their living room wall. She didn't really say sorry, Emily observed, leaning against her father's arm. Jack wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders. No, she didn't. But she took a first step, and sometimes that's the hardest part. Emily looked up at him. Are you okay, Dad? Jack thought about it for a moment. The hurt was still there, the memory of public humiliation, the whispers, the judging looks. But there was also a quiet satisfaction in being vindicated, in knowing that the truth had finally come to light. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, giving her shoulder a squeeze. I'm okay. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, working on Emily's homework and making dinner. The weight that had been pressing down on their shoulders felt a little lighter, even if it wasn't completely gone. Over the next few days, small changes began to appear. Mrs. Johnson from next door brought over a fresh apple pie, saying she'd missed seeing them around. The barista at the local coffee shop gave Jack his usual order with a genuine smile instead of an awkward glance. Even Mr. Peterson, who walked his dog past their house every morning, started waving again. They were small gestures, but they carried weight. Each friendly nod, each returned smile, was like a small stone being removed from the wall that had built up around them. The truth had begun to spread, slowly replacing the gossip that had caused so much damage. Jack kept the newspaper clipping about the teenage theft ring being caught. Not out of bitterness or as a reminder of Karen's accusations, but as a reminder that sometimes patience and dignity in the face of injustice could lead to understanding, even if that understanding came without the words, "I'm sorry." Plain white envelope arrived in Jack's mailbox on Thursday morning. Inside was a simple invitation to the monthly community meeting at the Veterans Memorial Hall. Jack hadn't attended one in months, not since before the incident at the grocery store. But this invitation was different. A personal note from his old friend Mike Sanders was attached. We need you there, Jack. Time to set things straight. Jack stood in his driveway, the morning sun warming his shoulders as he read the note again. Mike had served with him years ago, and they'd kept in touch after returning home. He was now the president of the local veterans group. That evening, Emily helped Jack pick out a shirt for the meeting. The blue one, she insisted, holding up his pressed button down. It brings out your eyes. Jack smiled, touched by her attention to detail. You sure you'll be okay at Sarah's house while I'm gone? Dad, I'm 12. Emily rolled her eyes, but her smile was warm. Besides, Mrs. Peterson said she's making chocolate chip cookies. The Veterans Memorial Hall stood proud at the edge of town, its brick facade weathered but well-maintained. As Jack pulled into the parking lot, he noticed more cars than usual for a monthly meeting. His stomach tightened. Mike was waiting at the entrance, his broad frame filling the doorway. Jack, he greeted, extending his hand. Glad you came. Inside, the meeting room was nearly full. Jack recognized many faces, some friendly, others still uncertain. The wooden floors creaked under his feet as Mike led him to the front row, where several other veterans sat. They nodded in greeting, and Jack felt a flutter of hope in his chest. Commander Richardson, a tall woman with steel gray hair, called the meeting to order. Before we begin our regular agenda, she announced, we have an important matter to address. Recent events have shown us that our community isn't immune to prejudice and hasty judgment. Mike Sanders has requested time to speak. Mike stood up, his presence commanding attention. Most of you know Jack Thompson, he began, his voice steady. He served our country for 20 years, lost his leg saving 3 of his fellow soldiers. But last month, some of you chose to believe the worst about him based on nothing but appearances and gossip. A rustling went through the crowd. Jack could see Karen sitting near the back, her face tight with discomfort. Jack, Mike turned to him. Would you like to say something? Jack hadn't planned to speak, but as he stood up, words formed naturally. I've lived in this town for 12 years, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Raised my daughter here after my wife passed. Never asked for special treatment. Never wanted it. He paused, looking around the room. What hurt wasn't just being accused of something I didn't do. It was how quickly people I'd known for years were willing to believe the worst. How fast they forgot that I'm more than just a guy with a prosthetic leg who sometimes keeps to himself. The room was silent now. Every face turned toward him. Jack continued. I understand fear. I've faced it. I understand judgment. 9-day. We all make snap decisions. But a community is supposed to be better than that. We're supposed to look out for each other. Give each other the benefit of the doubt. From the back of the room came movement. The grocery store manager, Mr. Collins, stood up. "Jack," he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you an apology. I knew you for years, knew you were a good man. But when pressure came, I took the easy way out. I'm sorry." The manager's words seemed to break a dam. Others began to speak up. Neighbors, parents from Emily's school, regular customers from the stores where Jack shopped. Each had a memory to share, a moment when Jack had helped them or shown kindness. Each expressed regret for their recent behavior. Mrs. Johnson, his next-door neighbor for 10 years, stood with tears in her eyes. "I remember when my Frank passed away," she said. "Jack cleared my driveway of snow every morning that winter, never said a word about it, never asked for thanks. That's the kind of man he is." The veterans in the front row nodded in agreement. One by one they stood up, forming a line of support behind Jack. Their silent presence spoke volumes about brotherhood and loyalty. Commander Richardson stepped forward again. "I think it's clear," she said, "that we as a community failed one of our own, but it's not too late to make it right." Collins walked to the front of the room, facing Jack directly. "The ban is officially lifted," he said, "and I'd like to offer you a personal apology. I should have stood up for what was right. I hope you can forgive me." Jack looked at the manager's extended hand, then grasped it firmly. "Thank you," he said simply. The meeting continued, but something had shifted in the room. People who had been avoiding Jack's gaze now met it with apologetic smiles. Those who had whispered behind his back now spoke to him directly, asking about Emily, about his work, about his life. Mike clapped a hand on Jack's shoulder. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The veterans group has your back, always did. And now, I think the rest of the town is starting to remember who you really are." Jack looked around the room, at the restaurant. Faces of his neighbors, some ashamed, some supportive, all changed by the evening's events. He thought of Emily, and how proud she would be to hear about this moment. Sometimes, he realized, it took standing up and speaking your truth to remind people of their own better natures. The meeting wrapped up with handshakes and conversations, with promises to do better and be better. As people filed out into the evening air, Jack felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. It wasn't perfect. Some wounds would take time to heal, but it was a start, a real one. The afternoon sun cast shadows through the kitchen window as Jack sorted mail. A cream-colored envelope addressed to both him and Emily caught his attention. Elegant handwriting. No return address. Emily, could you come here? Emily appeared. Homework forgotten. What is it, Dad? Jack held up the envelope. This came for both of us. They sat at the kitchen table as Jack opened it, revealing a letter and official documents. Dear Mr. Thompson and Emily, Jack read, his voice filled with growing surprise. Having witnessed the strength with which you faced adversity, I'd like to offer Emily a full scholarship for her future education. Emily's eyes widened. Jack's hands trembled as he continued. This scholarship covers education expenses through high school and includes a college fund. While I remain anonymous, this gesture comes from someone who observed your family's resilience and believes in investing in bright minds like Emily's. Emily reached for the documents, hands shaking. Dad, this is real. There's information about a trust fund. Jack studied the papers. The scholarship was legitimate, set up through a local bank. The donor had thought of everything. I can't believe it, Emily whispered. After everything. Jack pulled her close. Sometimes people surprise you in the best ways. The next morning at the bank, Mrs. Harrison greeted them warmly. I've been expecting you both. Everything's in order. The donor wanted to ensure you had all the support needed. As Mrs. Harrison explained the terms, Jack noticed Emily sitting straighter, eyes bright with possibility. This wasn't just money, it was faith in their future. That evening they celebrated with dinner at home. Emily insisted on helping cook her mother's lasagna recipe, the kitchen filling with comforting aromas. Emily placed wildflowers from their backyard on the table. "Mom would have loved this," she said softly. Jack nodded, remembering his wife's insistence on making dinner special. "She would have been so proud of you." Over steaming lasagna, Jack found himself overwhelmed. When this all started, the incident, the gossip, I wasn't sure we'd make it. I even thought about leaving town. "I'm glad we stayed," Emily said. "Me too." Jack breathed deeply. "This scholarship is more than money. It's the community saying they believe in us." "In us both, Dad," Emily corrected, squeezing his hand. "They see what I've always known, you're good, and always try to do right." "I was thinking," Emily said between bites, "maybe we could give back? Help people who need it, just because we can." Her generous spirit touched Jack deeply. Here was his daughter, turning their gift into opportunity to help others. They finished dinner discussing Emily's future plans, advanced classes now possible without financial worry. As they cleared dishes, Jack paused by the window. The same street, same neighbors, but something felt different. The community had found its way back to kindness, giving them hope. "Dad?" Emily held out a dish towel. "You know what, Emily?" he said, taking it. "I think we're going to be more than okay." The scholarship letter sat on the counter, tangible proof that goodness appears in surprising ways, and their community had shown them they belonged, they mattered, they were home. The community center buzzed as Jack Thompson and Emily arranged chairs. Handmade Veterans Family Support Fund signs decorated the walls, Emily's carefully drawn American flags in each corner. "Think anyone will come?" Emily asked, straightening a tablecloth. Jack adjusted his prosthetic leg. "Even if it's just a few people, we'll have done something good." The idea had come during a sleepless night. Instead of letting judgment define him, he'd show them who he really was. Mike, a retired police officer, entered carrying donated cookies. "The bakery sent these. More coming." Emily's face lit up. "Mrs. Peterson donated? She remembers your Saturday visits for fresh bread," Mike said. "Feels awful about believing those rumors." Volunteers trickled in. Sarah brought pamphlets about veteran services. Tom arrived with tools for the banner. Each person carried redemption. Emily's classmates appeared with parents, carrying treats and donations. The same kids who'd whispered were now smiling. Jack's throat tightened. He busied himself arranging chairs while Emily squeezed his hand before greeting friends. More people arrived. Jack shared stories with veterans about family challenges. Parents listened, reaching for checkbooks. The grocery store manager approached awkwardly. "I brought supplies," and wanted to apologize again. Jack accepted both gracefully. "Thank you for coming." The center grew crowded, warm with conversation and laughter. Children played while parents chatted and wrote checks. Emily coordinated volunteers confidently, her earlier fears forgotten. "Your daughter is special," commented Mrs. Wilson. "She's grown through all this." "She's stronger than me sometimes," Jack admitted. The donation box filled steadily. People who'd avoided him now offered handshakes and support. That's when he saw Karen. She stood in back, partially hidden, just watching. She looked smaller, more uncertain. The woman who'd pointed accusingly now seemed more human, holding a donation envelope. Emily appeared beside him. "She came." "She did," Jack replied, softly. Karen shifted uncomfortably, maintaining distance. The woman who'd wielded influence against them now witnessed their redemption. The irony wasn't lost on Jack. In trying to tear him down, Karen had set in motion events leading to this moment: community healing, people supporting veterans' families, his daughter standing proud. As evening approached, positive energy continued growing. Jack found himself surrounded by veterans, planning future events, occasionally glancing at Karen's silent observation. Emily worked through the crowd, thanking people, her smile genuine. She'd transformed from a girl afraid of whispers to a confident young woman who knew her family's worth. The real wealth wasn't in dollars, but in restored relationships, healed wounds, and strengthened community bonds. Former judges, making the victory sweeter. The atmosphere felt celebratory, not just raising funds, but something larger: truth over prejudice, understanding over judgment, community over division. People began trickling into the community center. First came the veterans, some walking with canes, others in wheelchairs. They greeted Jack with firm handshakes and knowing looks. Then local families arrived, carrying homemade dishes and desserts. The room filled with the warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Emily darted between groups, her face glowing as she handed out name tags and directed people to the refreshment tables. Jack watched her with pride, noting how she'd grown stronger through their recent struggles. She was no longer the withdrawn girl who'd hidden from whispers in school hallways. As Jack helped an elderly veteran to his seat, he caught sight of Karen Hayes standing near the entrance. She wore an expensive blue dress and clutched her designer purse, the same one from that day at the grocery store. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, neither moved. The buzz of conversation seemed to dim as Karen made her way toward him. Jack noticed she walked differently now, less rigid, without the air of superiority she'd worn like armor that day in the store. She stopped a few feet away, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "I wasn't sure if I should come." Jack nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Everyone's welcome here, Mrs. Hayes." Karen glanced around the room, taking in the veterans and their families, the hand-drawn signs, and the modest spread of food. "This is nice. What you're doing here." She paused, struggling with her words. "I've been thinking about what happened." Jack waited, remembering Emily's words from that morning. "Sometimes, Dad, people can surprise you." "I was wrong about you," Karen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That day in the store, I jumped to conclusions. I saw what I wanted to see, not what was actually happening." She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her dress. "When they caught those boys, the ones who'd been stealing from people, well, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake." Jack noticed she couldn't quite meet his eyes. Her admission wasn't exactly an apology, but he could see how much it cost her to say even this much. "The thing is, Mr. Thompson," she went on, "I've never been in a situation where I felt threatened. That day, when you were suddenly there, I reacted badly, very badly." A young boy ran past them, laughing, and Karen stepped aside to let him pass. The moment seemed to help her find her words again. "I know my post online caused you problems. I know people treated you differently because of what I said." She finally looked directly at him. "I was wrong about that too." Jack thought about all the sleepless nights, the whispers, the way Emily had cried after school. He could hold on to that anger. It would be easy, maybe even justified. But as he looked around the room at the community that had finally come together, he realized something. Holding on to bitterness would only poison his own heart. "Thank you for saying that," he said simply. Karen seemed surprised by his calm response. "You're not going to tell me off? After everything?" Jack shook his head. What would that accomplish? Emily appeared at his side then, carrying a plate of cookies. She hesitated when she saw Karen, but Jack placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like a cookie, Mrs. Hayes?" Emily asked, her voice steady and clear. Karen took one, and her composed facade cracked slightly. "I have a daughter too, you know. She's in college now, but..." She trailed off, looking at the cookie in her hand. "You have a good father, Emily." Emily smiled, genuine and bright. "I know." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and understanding. Then Karen nodded once, turned, and walked toward the donation table. Jack watched as she wrote a check and placed it in the collection box. "Dad?" Emily said softly. "Are you okay?" Jack pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, sweetheart, I really am." The event continued around them. Veterans sharing stories, children playing, neighbors chatting over coffee and cookies. Jack looked at the faces of people who had once crossed the street to avoid him, now smiling and contributing to his cause. He thought about Karen's words, not quite an apology, but something else, an acknowledgement of his humanity. A retired Marine called him over to help with the raffle drawing, and Jack moved through the crowd with steady steps. His prosthetic leg didn't draw stares anymore, or if it did, he no longer noticed. The weight of others' judgment had lifted, leaving him lighter, freer. As the afternoon wore on, Jack found himself sharing stories with fellow veterans, laughing at old jokes, and accepting heartfelt thanks from families who would benefit from the fund. He watched Emily move confidently through the room, no longer burdened by shame or doubt. Karen left quietly, slipping out during the raffle drawing. Jack saw her go but felt no need to say anything more. Some wounds didn't need perfect closure to heal. Sometimes, just acknowledging the hurt was enough to begin moving forward. The success of the event wasn't measured in the amount of money raised, though the donation box was pleasantly full. It wasn't even measured in the number of people who attended, though the turnout had exceeded his expectations. The real victory was in the connections rebuilt, the bridges mended, and the understanding that had grown in place of suspicion. Jack sat down next to a young veteran who had lost both legs in combat. They didn't talk about their injuries or their struggles. Instead, they discussed their children, their hopes, and their plans for the future. It was the kind of conversation Jack had missed during those dark days of isolation. Simple, human connection, without judgment or fear. As the afternoon light slanted through the community center windows, Jack felt at peace with how things had turned out. Not perfect, not completely resolved, but good enough to build upon. He would probably never be close friends with Karen Hayes, but her gesture today had helped close a difficult chapter in his life. The community center buzzed with activity as more people filtered in for the charity event. Veterans, families, and familiar faces from around town filled the space with warm chatter and genuine smiles. Jack stood near the entrance, greeting everyone with a firm handshake and a grateful nod. Emily darted between groups, her eyes bright with excitement as she helped serve refreshments. The tension that had weighed on her shoulders for weeks seemed to melt away as she watched her father being embraced by the community once again. The store manager, dressed in his usual pressed shirt and tie, made his way through the crowd. His face showed a mix of determination and remorse as he approached Jack. "Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "Could we talk for a moment?" Jack nodded, following him to a quieter corner of the room. The manager cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable but resolute. "I want to personally apologize for how everything was handled at the store. We should have listened to you. We should have investigated properly." He paused, straightening his tie. "I'd like to formally invite you back to shop with us. No restrictions, no conditions." Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't just about being able to buy groceries, it was about belonging again. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. The manager wasn't finished. "And we'd like to offer you a special veterans discount." "It's something we should have done long ago." He pulled out an official-looking card from his pocket. "This is our way of showing appreciation for your service." Emily appeared at her father's side, having noticed the conversation. Her face lit up when she saw the card. The manager smiled at her. "Your father is always welcome in our store, Emily. We're sorry for ever making either of you feel otherwise." Throughout the afternoon, more people approached Jack with similar sentiments. Mrs. Peterson from the library brought him a basket of fresh-baked cookies. "We miss seeing you at the reading club," she said warmly. Mr. Rodriguez, who owned the local hardware store, clapped him on the shoulder. "My door's always open, amigo," he said with a genuine smile. The following week, Jack and Emily stood in front of the grocery store. It was early morning, and the parking lot was relatively empty. Jack gripped his cane a little tighter, memories of that day with Karen still fresh in his mind. Emily squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Dad. Things are different now." They walked through the automatic doors together. The familiar smell of fresh produce and baked bread greeted them. The same cashier who had witnessed the incident with Karen months ago now gave them a warm wave. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson." As they moved through the aisles, other shoppers nodded and smiled. There were no suspicious glances, no whispered conversations behind hands. Jack found himself relaxing, his shoulders dropping from their defensive posture. In the cereal aisle, they ran into Mrs. Martinez, Emily's math teacher. "Jack! Emily, so good to see you here." she said, pushing her cart alongside theirs.
Emily's been doing wonderfully in class. You must be so proud.
Jack smiled, watching his daughter blush at the praise. I am, he said simply, but his chest swelled with emotion. The weeks that followed brought more changes. The coffee shop owner started saving Jack's favorite blend for him. The local diner added his name to their Veterans Eat Free Wall of Honor. Even the young boy who delivered their newspaper began leaving it closer to the door, making it easier for Jack on his tough days. Emily flourished in this new atmosphere. Her grades improved even more, and she started joining after-school activities again. The shadow that had hung over them both began to fade. One morning, as they walked to the grocery store for their weekly shopping, they passed Karen's house. She was in her garden, pruning roses. When she saw them, she gave a small, uncertain wave. Jack nodded back, neither friendly nor hostile. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acceptance, an acknowledgement that the past was the past. Inside the store, Jack noticed small changes. The aisles had been slightly widened, making it easier for him to maneuver with his cane. A new section featured products from veteran-owned businesses. The manager had been true to his word about making the store more welcoming. As they filled their cart with the week's necessities, Jack caught glimpses of his reflection in the store's mirrors. He stood straighter now, his face more relaxed. Emily walked beside him, chattering about her upcoming science project, no longer worried about being judged or whispered about. At the checkout, the cashier didn't just ring up their items. She asked about Emily's school and commented on Jack's choice of coffee. "This one's on sale this week," she said warmly, pointing to a different brand. "It's another veteran-owned company. Thought you might want to try it." Loading the groceries into their car, Jack paused to watch the morning sunrise over the shopping center. The same parking lot that had once been the site of his humiliation now felt different. It was just a parking lot again, no longer a place of shame or anger. Emily helped arrange the bags in the trunk, humming softly. "You know what, Dad?" she said, closing the trunk with a satisfying thunk. "I think we're going to be okay." Jack looked at his daughter, seeing the wisdom in her young face. She had weathered this storm with him, shown courage when he faltered, and never lost faith. "Yeah, kiddo," he replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I think we are." The drive home was peaceful, filled with Emily's chatter about school and her friends. The town passed by their windows, the same streets, the same buildings, but somehow different. The shadows had lifted, replaced by something warmer, something that felt a lot like hope. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees of Memorial Park, sending golden leaves dancing across the path where Jack and Emily walked side by side. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the air carried that crisp sweetness that made everything feel fresh and new. Emily kicked at the leaves as they walked, just like she used to when she was younger. "Remember when we used to come here every Sunday?" she asked, glancing up at her father. Jack smiled, his pace steady despite his prosthetic leg. "Sure do. You'd spend hours on that swing set over there." He pointed to the playground where a few kids were playing. "Could barely get you to leave when it got dark." They followed the familiar path around the duck pond, where they'd spent countless afternoons feeding the birds and duck pond, talking about their days. The wooden benches where they used to sit still lined the water's edge, weathered but sturdy, just like Jack himself. "It feels different now," Emily said thoughtfully, "but good different." Jack nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The park had been their refuge during the hardest days, when the whispers and stares in town had become too much to bear. Now it felt like a place of celebration rather than escape. "You know, Dad," Emily continued, picking up a particularly bright red leaf, "I'm really proud of how you handled everything. With Karen, and the store, and everything else." Jack's throat tightened with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy, especially when you're 12. They passed the community bulletin board where, just a few weeks ago, they'd posted flyers for the charity event. Now it displayed photos from that day, veterans and their families smiling, children playing, and community members coming together. Jack paused to look at them, remembering the overwhelming support they'd received. I saw Karen at the grocery store yesterday, Emily said, watching her father's reaction carefully. Jack's expression remained calm. How'd that go? She actually smiled at me. Emily shrugged. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sometimes that's all we need, Jack replied. A small gesture can mean a lot. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. The path led them past the Veterans Memorial, where Jack always paused to pay his respects. The polished stone reflected the late afternoon light, the names of fallen soldiers etched eternally in its surface. You know what I learned from all this? Emily asked, her voice soft but clear. What's that? That being strong doesn't mean you have to fight back. Sometimes it means staying true to who you are, even when others don't see it. Jack stopped walking, looking at his daughter with pride and amazement. When did you get so wise? Emily grinned. Must be all those father-daughter talks we've had on these walks. They reached their favorite bench overlooking the pond, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of orange and pink. Jack sat down, stretching out his prosthetic leg, while Emily settled beside him. You know, Jack said, watching a family of ducks glide across the water, I used to worry that this town would never feel like home again, that maybe we should have left when things got tough. Emily leaned against his shoulder. I'm glad we stayed. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, reflecting off the pond's surface like nature's own light show. Other parkgoers walked by, offering friendly waves and warm greetings, a stark contrast to the avoided glances of just a few weeks ago. Dad? Emily's voice was thoughtful. Do you think things will stay this way? Good, I mean? Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Life has its ups and downs, Emmy. But what matters is having people who stand by you through both. And we've got that now, more than ever. They sat together, watching the sun sink lower in the sky, painting everything in soft, golden light. The air grew cooler, but neither made a move to leave. This moment felt too precious to rush. A group of veterans Jack knew from the support group walked past, calling out greetings. One stopped to thank Jack again for organizing the charity event, mentioning how it had inspired them to plan more community activities. After they left, Emily smiled. See? You're making a difference, Dad. Just by being you. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently. We both are, kiddo. We both are. The sunset's final rays stretched across the park, turning everything to gold. Children's laughter echoed from the playground, mixing with the rustle of leaves and the gentle splashing of ducks in the pond. It was the same park they'd always known, but somehow everything felt new, full of possibility. This was their place. Not just a refuge anymore, but a reminder of how far they'd come. Jack looked at his daughter, so grown up and wise beyond her years, and felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. They'd weathered the storm together and emerged stronger for it. The light faded slowly from the sky, stars beginning to peek through the darkening blue above them. Jack and Emily remained on their bench, sharing the comfortable silence that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting warm rays across the breakfast table where Jack and Emily sat, sharing their usual morning routine. Jack stirred his coffee thoughtfully, his weathered hands wrapped around the familiar blue mug Emily had given him years ago. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of his phone. Hello? Jack answered, his voice still carrying traces of early morning roughness. Emily watched as her father's expression changed from curiosity to surprise. She could tell from the way he sat up straighter that something important was happening. Yes, I understand, Jack said, his voice steady but filled with an enthusiasm she hadn't heard in a while. I would be very interested in discussing this further. When he hung up the phone, Emily couldn't contain her curiosity. Dad? What was that about? Jack set his phone down carefully, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That was Tom Harrison from the Veterans Outreach Program. They're looking for someone to help coordinate their support services. He paused, his eyes brightening. They want me to come in for an interview. Emily's face lit up. Dad, that's perfect. You'd be amazing at that. Jack nodded, allowing himself to feel the full weight of this opportunity. After everything that had happened with Karen in the grocery store incident, this felt like more than just a job offer. It was a chance to turn his painful experiences into something meaningful. They've been watching how I handled everything these past few months, Jack explained, his voice soft with wonder. Tom said they were impressed by how I organized the charity event and how I managed to bring the community together. Emily reached across the table and squeezed her father's hand. See? Sometimes good things come from hard times, Jack squeezed back, remembering all the moments when Emily's faith in him had been his anchor. You're right, kiddo. You're absolutely right. The interview was scheduled for later that afternoon. Jack stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his tie with careful precision. His military training showed in every crisp line of his pressed shirt and the perfect fold of his collar. Emily appeared in the doorway, holding his polished dress shoes. These were under the bed, she said, presenting them with a flourish. I gave them an extra shine. Jack took the shoes, touched by his daughter's thoughtfulness. Thank you, Emily. You know, whatever happens today, I'm proud of us. We've come through some tough times together. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. We're stronger now, aren't we? We sure are. The Veterans Outreach Center was housed in a modest brick building downtown. Jack had visited before, but today felt different. As he walked through the front door, he was greeted by familiar faces, other veterans he'd helped during the charity event, staff members who had supported him during the recent troubles. Tom Harrison, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, met Jack in the lobby. Jack, good to see you, he said, extending his hand. Let's talk in my office. The interview lasted over an hour, but it felt more like a conversation between old friends. They discussed Jack's military service, his experience with the charity event, and his ideas for expanding the program's reach. Tom listened intently as Jack shared his vision for helping other veterans feel more connected to the community. You know, Jack, Tom said toward the end of their meeting, when we saw how you handled that situation at the grocery store, with dignity and grace, even when people turned against you, we knew you were exactly the kind of person we need here. Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. I had a lot of help, he said honestly. My daughter, Emily, she never lost faith in me, and in the end, the community came through. Tom smiled and stood up, extending his hand once again. Well, Jack, I don't need to deliberate on this. The job is yours if you want it. We need someone who understands both the struggles our veterans face and the importance of community support. You've lived it. You've overcome it. What do you say? Jack stood and grasped Tom's hand firmly. I'd be honored, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion he felt. That evening, Jack and Emily celebrated with pizza and ice cream, their traditional celebration meal since Emily was little. As they sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jack felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. You know what this means? Emily asked, licking ice cream from her spoon. You'll be helping other people who might be going through what we did. Jack nodded, considering her words. Sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the most important lessons. I never would have thought that what happened with Karen would lead to something like this. Emily leaned against her father's shoulder. I'm really proud of you, Dad. The next morning, Jack stood in front of his closet, selecting his outfit for his first day of work. Emily had already laid out his favorite tie, the one with tiny silver stars that she'd given him for Father's Day. He picked it up, smiling at the memory. Ready for breakfast? Emily called from the kitchen. I made your favorite, French toast. Over breakfast, they talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. Jack felt lighter than he had in years, as if a weight he'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Want to walk with me to the office? Jack asked as they cleared the dishes. It's on your way to school, Emily beamed. I was hoping you'd ask. Together, they stepped out into the crisp morning air. The town was coming alive around them. Shopkeepers opening their stores, neighbors walking their dogs, kids heading to school. People waved and called out greetings as they passed. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, These same streets had felt hostile and unwelcoming. As they approached the Veterans Outreach Center, Emily stopped and turned to her father. "This is it, Dad. Your new beginning." Jack pulled his daughter into a tight hug, overwhelmed by how far they'd come together. "Our new beginning," he corrected her softly. The community center buzzed with excitement as people filed into the main hall. Streamers in red, white, and blue hung from the ceiling, and round tables dotted the room, each decorated with simple centerpieces of white flowers. A podium stood at the front, flanked by the American flag and the state flag. Jack Thompson adjusted his tie for the 100th time, standing in a quiet corner near the stage. His prosthetic leg felt heavier than usual under his dress pants, probably from the nerves. Emily, looking lovely in her blue dress, noticed his fidgeting and reached up to straighten his tie herself. "Dad, you look fine," she said, smoothing down his lapels. "More than fine, actually. You look great." Jack managed a small smile. "Thanks, kiddo." He glanced around the room, still amazed at how many people had shown up. The Veterans Outreach Program had organized this celebration to honor his work over the past year, but he hadn't expected such a turnout. The same grocery store where everything had started was now one of the event's main sponsors. Their logo hung prominently on a banner near the entrance, and the manager, Mike, had personally helped set everything up. Even more surprising was the sight of Karen sitting at one of the front tables, looking decidedly different from the angry woman who had accused him all those months ago. Tom Harrison, Jack's supervisor at the Veterans Program, approached them with a warm smile. "Ready for your big moment, Jack?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Jack replied, his voice gruff but grateful. 27 veterans helped back into civilian work, 15 families receiving regular support, and that housing initiative you started? The board's still talking about that one. Emily beamed with pride. "See, Dad? I told you you'd be perfect for this job." The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the ceremony. Emily gave her father one last hug before joining the audience. Jack watched her take her seat in the front row, remembering how she'd stood by him through everything. Tom took the podium first, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "A year ago, our community faced a moment that could have divided us. Instead, thanks to the strength and character of one man, it brought us together." As Tom spoke about Jack's achievements, scenes from the past year played through Jack's mind. The first veteran he'd helped find housing, a young man not much older than he'd been when he first enlisted. The Christmas drive he'd organized for military families. The support group he'd started for children of veterans, inspired by Emily's experiences. "And now," Tom continued, "I'd like to invite Jack Thompson to come up and say a few words." The applause was immediate and genuine. Jack made his way to the podium, his steps measured and confident. He looked out at the sea of faces, friends, neighbors, fellow veterans, and community members who had become like family. "A year ago," Jack began, his voice steady, despite his nerves, "I stood in a grocery store, feeling like an outsider in my own hometown." He paused, meeting Karen's eyes briefly. She gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. "Today, I stand here because this community showed me that second chances are real, that understanding can grow from misunderstanding, and that service to others is the best way to heal ourselves." Emily wiped a tear from her cheek as her father continued speaking. She remembered how close they'd come to leaving town, how defeated he'd looked during those dark days. Now, watching him stand tall at the podium, she saw not just her father, but a man who had helped transform their community. "This award," Jack said, gesturing to the plaque Tom had presented him, "belongs to all of us, to every veteran who trusted me with their story, to every family who opened their hearts to help, and to every community member who proved that compassion is stronger than prejudice." The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet, and Jack caught glimpses of familiar faces. Mike from the grocery store beaming proudly, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son he'd helped get into college, old Mr. Peterson, who'd become a regular at the veterans' coffee meetings. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared refreshments, Jack found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Emily stayed close by, watching with quiet joy as person after person came up to thank her father or share a story about how he'd helped them. Karen approached them last, holding a small envelope. "Jack," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I wanted you to have this." She handed him the envelope and quickly walked away before he could respond. Inside was a donation check to the Veterans Program and a simple note: "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." As the evening wound down, Jack and Emily decided to walk home together, enjoying the warm spring air. The streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk, and the sound of crickets filled the peaceful night. "You know what, Dad?" Emily said as they walked, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "I think Mom would be really proud of you." Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You think so?" "I know so," Emily replied firmly. "You turned something bad into something amazing. You helped so many people." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. The same streets that had once felt hostile now felt welcoming, filled with memories of small victories and growing acceptance. "I'm proud of you too, you know," Jack said, looking down at his daughter. "You never gave up on me, even when things were rough." Emily smiled, leaning her head against his arm as they walked. "That's what family does, Dad. We stick together." The lights of their home came into view, warm and inviting in the growing darkness. Jack felt a deep sense of contentment settle over him. This was where they belonged, not just in this house, but in this community that had learned to see beyond its prejudices and had become stronger for it. Together, father and daughter walked up their front path, their steps sure and steady, knowing they had found their place in the world. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Thompson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.